What would you do if the people sworn to protect your husband smiled at his coffin and secretly cheered his end? Who mourns when grief is a lie? Margaret Hayes stood at the front of the chapel, a white handkerchief pressed to her mouth, and watched the world she'd known peel itself away. The flowers looked beautiful enough to choke on. The organ swelled. The eulogy sounded like rehearsed promises. Her husband's brothers cried the loudest. Their sobs were big and public and perfectly placed for cameras and cousins and the family lawyer. They clasped one another, arms tight, faces wet with sympathy. People leaned in, nodded, murmured condolences. They said all the right things. But Margaret heard something else under the words. The tiny, dangerous sounds that reveal true intent. The soft click of a phone screen. A brief, muffled laughter swallowed quickly. The rustle of suit jackets as men shifted closer to claim imaginary corners of a man's life. A nurse, one of the few who had lingered after the funeral, pulled Margaret aside and whispered, "They forced him out of the company, Mrs. Hayes. We heard them at the meeting, said it had to be done for the business." The nurse's hands trembled. She didn't know how many quiet favors Margaret had done for that hospital, or how many late-night coffees she'd ordered for understaffed wards. She didn't know Margaret was already listening, already counting. Everyone did what the bereaved must do. They comforted her. They pattered across the polished floor and offered platitudes. "If you need anything, call me. We'll take care of everything. Your family will do right by you." Their eyes shifted, though. Right by whom? Not the man in the coffin. Margaret felt the weight of the black suit across from her as a hand, a brother's hand, brushed hers in a show of support. The touch was cold and calculated. He leaned in, voice soft enough for only her to hear. "We did what had to be done," he said. "You understand, business is business." His smile was a blade. She looked down at the polished wood, at the photograph propped against the flowers. Him laughing at the lake. Hair windblown, an old fishing hat in his hand. The photo held the private light she'd known for 30 years. How many dinners had they shared? How many nights had they argued and forgiven? How many times had they promised to be a team? Outside the chapel, the rain started, slow, polite, as if the weather itself were keeping up the pretense. Coffin lowered. People unfolded programs, checked watches, plotted the next move. Margaret's throat felt hollow. She had been taught to be quiet in storms. She'd learned to listen instead of shout. She had learned that silence could hold more truth than any outcry. When the men stepped forward to speak, short toasts, practiced grief, she let them. She listened to their polished words about legacy and stability and doing what's best. She kept her face soft. She let them assume what they wanted to assume, that her sorrow could be worn like a cloak, that she could be managed. She watched as relatives lined up to say goodbye. She watched as hands reached for condolence checks and for signatures that might move property titles. She watched the brothers exchange that same look, the one that says, a job is done, a threat removed, a path cleared. As the coffin began its slow descent, as the minister's voice faded into the hollow echo, Margaret's breath found a steady rhythm. Her face did not fracture. Her hands did not tremble. There was nothing theatrical about her grief. It was small, precise, like something wrapped and stored for later. She leaned slightly forward, close enough that only the air between her and the man she once loved carried her words. They were not for the crowd. They were not a plea. They were a verdict. "You took his life," she said, voice low and even. "Now I'll take yours, piece by piece." They say silence heals, but sometimes silence is where you learn what dying really feels like. When Emma's husband left, the house didn't just feel empty, it echoed. Every corner whispered his betrayal. The bedroom smelled like the life she wasn't allowed to have anymore. The bed, too big. The kitchen, too quiet. The world, too cruel. Her family called once or twice. Friends texted out of guilt. But as the weeks turned to months, the messages stopped. No one wanted to sit with the sick woman who reminded them of their own mortality. At first, Emma begged for calls that never came. Then, she stopped begging. She started writing instead. Pages filled with pain, anger, and a single recurring line. "They left me to die, so I'll learn to live." Her body was weak, but her mind sharper than ever. Between chemo sessions and sleepless nights, she started reading. Books on nutrition, psychology, biology. Anything that could explain why people break and how to rebuild them. She'd sit by the window, wrapped in a blanket, tubes in her arm, eyes locked on the sunrise. "Every day I survive," she wrote, "I become someone they won't recognize." She changed her diet. She studied the science of healing, not just medicine, but mindset, discipline, peace. Slowly, her body began responding. Hair grew back. Skin regained its color. But what truly changed was her soul. Her pain became her blueprint. Her notebooks turned into research. Notes, formulas, ideas for something bigger. Something no one saw coming. Months later, she returned to the hospital. The same doctor who once avoided eye contact now smiled. He said softly, "Emma, you're cancer-free." The room fell silent. The nurse waited for tears, for relief, for gratitude. But Emma didn't cry. She simply looked out the window at the same sun she'd watched through pain and whispered, "Now the healing begins, but not mine." The calm before the storm. The woman they buried in silence just woke up. They buried her in silence, but the world wasn't ready for her rebirth. Years passed, and from that pain, from that slow burn of betrayal, a name began to rise. Eterna Life. It started small. A blog, a few homemade products, a mission built on 3 words: mind, body, soul. She didn't just want to heal people. She wanted to teach them what true survival looked like. Every post she wrote came from her scars. Every ingredient she used came from her sleepless research. And then it happened. One story went viral. The woman who cured her cancer through discipline and belief. The world listened. Investors came knocking. And the same Emma who once begged for help now sat at the head of a table filled with million-dollar contracts. Her brand exploded. Eterna Life wasn't just a company, it was a movement. Her voice became the anthem of healing. Her face, the symbol of strength. The woman once abandoned for being too weak to survive was now giving hope to millions who'd lost theirs. But fate has a dark sense of irony, because on the other side of the city, Daniel's empire was burning. His company, mismanaged, manipulated, and drained by the same mistress he left Emma for, was collapsing. 1 lawsuit, 2 defaults, and a headline that read, "CEO faces bankruptcy after scandal." He tried to rebuild, tried to find a way back, but every door closed, until one day, A new company caught his eye. A growing wellness giant. Clean image, global reach, Eterna Life. He sent in his resume, desperate, broke, unaware. And when it landed on her desk, Emma froze for only a moment. Her assistant frowned. Should we reject him? Emma leaned back, her eyes calm, almost kind. A faint smile touched her lips. No, she said softly. Let's give him a second chance. The assistant hesitated. You believe in second chances? Emma looked out the window, voice steady. I believe in healing. He's walking into the very empire built from the ashes of the woman he left to die. And she's waiting. He entered the glass tower of Eterna Life like a man clinging to the last shred of hope. The lobby glowed with the company's motto, Healing begins within. He read it twice, believing he was finally stepping into redemption. But the irony? The building itself was her creation. Every light, every wall, every silent camera watching him. He just didn't know. The ghost he buried had built the empire he now begged to join. When Daniel met the CEO, he didn't recognize her. Her posture, unshakable. Her tone, calm, commanding. The same woman who once trembled before him now stood taller than the skyline behind her. Welcome to Eterna Life, she said softly. He shook her hand, smiling with fake humility. Something about her eyes unnerved him. Familiar, but colder. Have we met before? He asked. She smiled faintly. Perhaps in another lifetime. One morning, his access card didn't open the executive floor. Security checked his clearance. System glitch, they said. But he knew. This wasn't a glitch. This was precision. Every day that passed, he lost a piece of himself. The power, the confidence, the illusion. He was shrinking, and she was watching. He began to wake up at night drenched in sweat, hearing her voice in his dreams. Healing begins within. Over and over, until it sounded like mockery. Then one night, it broke him. He stayed late, papers scattered, his pride collapsing under the silence of the office. And for the first time in years, Daniel Hayes, the man who once controlled every life around him, knocked on a door. Her door. The room was dimly lit. She didn't look up from her laptop. He stepped closer, voice trembling, anger barely contained. Why are you doing this to me? He whispered. She finally looked up, calm, unflinching, eyes steady as stone. Because you taught me how. The ghost he buried has returned, not to haunt, but to mirror his sins back to him. The next morning begins like any other, but today, truth walks in uninvited. Daniel enters the conference room, clutching a report, trying to salvage the little authority he has left. He looks around. No one makes eye contact. The room that once echoed with his voice now feels like a tomb. At the head of the table sits Emma, serene, composed, radiant. Behind her, a massive screen lights up. Eterna Life, founded by Emma Hayes. His fingers freeze. That name, Emma Hayes. His breath catches. The world tilts. The room fades. It's her. The woman he left to die. The woman whose name he erased from every contract, every memory. And now, she owns everything. He stumbles back, whispering, This isn't possible. Emma looks at him calmly. It's reality, Daniel. You used to teach me how to face it, remember? Every executive watches in silence. No shouting, no humiliation. Just poetic justice unfolding in slow motion. He breaks into a desperate smile. Emma, please! I didn't know. I made mistakes, but we can rebuild. She interrupts softly. Rebuild? You burned everything. You didn't just leave me, Daniel. You buried me alive. He falls to his knees, hands trembling. Please, just give me one more chance. Emma's expression doesn't change. She walks around the table, each step echoing louder than words. I'm not here to destroy you, she says. I'm here to show you what true healing looks like. She slides an envelope toward him. Termination papers. Simple, clean, final. You're fired, she says gently, but not forgotten. Never forgotten. He looks up, eyes wet. Emma, please forgive me. Her face softens, but her words cut deeper than any scream. Forgiveness isn't free. It's earned through suffering. You finally started yours. He collapses in defeat as security escorts him out. Silent, broken, invisible. Emma stands by the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Below her, Eterna Life headquarters glows with her name, Emma Hayes. Once, that name was discarded. Now, it's carved into the skyline. Her voice fades into the night. He left me when I was dying. But the woman who rose from that pain made sure he lived with it.